Two high schoolers, one plan, nearly $1 million in clean profit. They weren't just selling weed behind the bleachers, they literally built a cartel inside their school, recruiting classmates, pushing coke and ecstasy in bathroom stalls. These two were kings of that life, until one fatal mistake brought it all crashing down. But how did they manage to stay afloat for so long? Let's find out. Picture a quiet green suburb, where the lawns are straighter than a military cadet's haircut. This is Haverford, a small town outside Philadelphia, where people smile like their mortgages got forgiven back in the 90s. And the biggest problem is choosing which convertible to take out on the weekend. The average family income? Over $230,000 a year. Houses worth $1.5 million. It's a picture-perfect postcard of the ideal life. And right in the middle of it all stands Haverford School, an elite prep academy. A factory pumping out champions, congressmen, and future stars. Tuition, $46 grand a year. And for that price, you don't just get an education, you buy yourself a ticket into the elite. But even in the most polished neighborhoods, some stories shatter the perfect image. Our first character, Neil Scott. This kid wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, more like a cheap aluminum fork from the dollar store. He lived in a modest house in Powley, just 20 minutes from Haverford. His future looked pretty ordinary, until sports changed everything. Neil was such a natural in the goal that he scored himself a scholarship to Haverford. Imagine it. A regular kid suddenly dropped into a world of lawyers and surgeons' sons, the only one without a trust fund. On the field, he shined. Lacrosse, water polo, you name it. Everyone thought he had a bright future ahead. But behind the perfect boy image was someone with a fuse shorter than a matchstick. By 2008, Neil graduated and enrolled at a college in Connecticut. Looked like the success story would continue, but it didn't. His game fell flat, like a balloon after the party's over. Teammates didn't sugarcoat it, just an average player with constant meltdowns. Instead of focusing on sports, Neil dove into partying, weed, and fake IDs for booze. 3 semesters later, the school tossed him out like an empty beer can. He drifted to San Diego, living in a beach bungalow, playing the part of cool surfer without a board. He coached kids and picked up shifts at a medical marijuana dispensary. Life seemed manageable, until he screamed at a 10-year-old during practice. That got him fired. From there, it was back into drugs, but this time, pills. Stronger stuff. By late 2013, Neil returned to Philly. Broke, aimless, with one thought in his head. What if I start selling the same stuff I'm using? Now, our second player, Timothy Brooks. Unlike Neil, Tim grew up in upscale Villanova, where houses cost $1 million a pop, and neighbors barely wave because their mansions are hidden behind tall fences. Tim's dad was pulling in nearly $500,000 a year, so the kid was living comfortably. In high school, Tim was the local star. Lacrosse captain, golfer, squash player. Everything seemed effortless. He was the golden boy everyone envied. A scholarship to the University of Richmond felt like his big break, but life hit him with a brutal twist. Just a month in, Tim tore up his shoulder. Surgery ended his athletic career on the spot. No lacrosse meant no identity, no purpose. The game was everything, and without it, he was nobody. Working for his dad, out of the question. Relying on family, never. So the same old thought started spinning in his head. I need to find a quick way to make money. So here's the picture. 2 guys from totally different starting lines end up in the same hole. One from a modest house, the other from a mansion. Both blew their shot at the future. Both refused to take the long, honest road. Watching everyone else succeed, they felt like outsiders. No longer athletes, no longer students at prestigious colleges. Just 2 young men looking around thinking, maybe it's time to cheat the system? And that thought bonded them. Neil and Tim's stories show it clearly. Different paths, same destination. They were given every opportunity, but instead, they decided to gamble. A gamble where the stake was their own lives. And that's where their real game began. Fall of 2013. In Philly's suburbs, the air smelled not just of fresh-cut grass, but of ambition. Ambition way bigger than the guys themselves. They decided it was time to stop being ordinary. They needed something bold, something unforgettable. That's when they came up with their highway takeover project. No, not about asphalt or road repairs. It was about controlling the entire drug market in the wealthy suburbs. 17 towns, filled with high school kids with pocket money and college students with their parents' credit cards. The perfect target audience for 2 wannabe kingpins. They weren't interested in pushing baggies. They wanted to run territory. Naive? Definitely. Ambitious? No doubt. But that's exactly how the biggest downfalls in history always begin. Every cartel needs a base, and they found one. Neil's old house, just 5 minutes from Haverford. Empty, run down. But for them, it was HQ. So yeah, right next to an elite prep school grooming future senators, a teenage drug empire was now cooking. The contrast was almost comical. Necktie-wearing elite versus cartel kids in a beat-up shack. But they didn't care. They had a roof over their heads and more than enough customers. Next question, where to get product? Neil remembered his connections in California. In reality, just some old contacts from his days at a medical marijuana shop. But it was enough. Soon, pounds of weed started moving into the house. A real cartel boss would have rolled his eyes. Do these kids even know what they're doing? But Neil and Tim were hyped. Their fantasy was turning into a business. Now, they needed manpower. Recruitment rule was simple: bring your own crew. Neil pulled in 2 buddies from lacrosse. Timothy brought in a kid named Dan McGrath, who immediately pulled in 3 more. And the chain reaction started. Friend groups turned into dealing squads. And it worked. Trust was stronger than half the adult business world. The network spread fast. High schools, colleges, universities, everywhere. Their people were showing up. Each dealer got a quota. Move at least a kilo a week. No freebies, no handouts, only sales, only money. Basically, it was a high school franchise. While regular kids were collecting comic books, their dealers were collecting clients. And soon, roles became clear. Timothy, the face of the company, charming, confident, sharp suit, telling kids, "Don't worry, we've got lawyers if anything happens." He looked like a businessman, only his product wasn't coffee beans. Neil, the complete opposite. Tough, intimidating, no smiles. He knew how to pressure people, how to scare them into line. Together, they became the good boss and bad boss duo. And business was booming. One school dealer could pull in up to $15,000 a week. 12 dealers meant $180,000. In a single month, that's nearly $720,000. Numbers college students only ever heard in their econ lectures. But for these two, that was just the new normal. Over time, they expanded the menu, adding cocaine and ecstasy. For them, it felt like a business upgrade. They honestly started believing they'd become real drug lords. From the outside, though, it looked more like kids playing mafia. But in the mirror, they saw something different. The kings of the highway. And the higher their confidence grew, the clearer it became. When they fell, they'd fall hard. Expansion. That's always the temptation. Once you taste money, stopping isn't an option. That's how it was for Timothy and Neil. Instead of being satisfied with their first wins, they decided to push further, and not quietly. They went big. New schools, new colleges, new dealers. They cast their nets into every classroom like they were fishing in an aquarium. And the network spread fast. 5 high schools, 3 colleges, 12 new soldiers. Now their business wasn't some teenage prank. It looked like a real marketplace. And with that came the illusion of power. The bigger the network, the stronger they felt. But we, the audience, already know the bigger the net, the more holes for everything to slip through. They thought they were rich. In reality, they were just kids with piles of cash and 0 brains. And now, the grown-ups, the cops, were starting to notice their little empire. Here's the thing. Every criminal scheme has a weak link, and theirs was glaring. The dealers started bragging on social media. New sneakers, flashy purchases, photos with not-so-subtle hints about their product. One kid was dumb enough to post actual pictures of drugs on Instagram. The police looked at it and probably thought, "Thanks, guys. You've dug your own grave." Instead of staying in the shadows, they chose the spotlights. Instead of caution, showing off. And that was the beginning of the end. By January 2014, patience had run out. Montgomery County Police officially launched an investigation. Now, the full anti-drug machine was on them. Surveillance, wiretaps, undercover ops, the clock had started ticking. The first blow came fast. Police identified 4 small-time dealers and went classic. Undercover sting, controlled buys, quiet meetups, and boom, the kids were caught. One even tried to flush all his weed down the toilet, but there was so much the toilet clogged. Comedy? Yes. But that's the reality. Their cartel was collapsing in the most pathetic way possible. Then came the confessions. The arrested students weren't about to keep their mouths shut. They admitted it all. Yes, they sold. Yes, they threatened people. Yes, Timothy and Neil were in charge. No code of silence. Just regular kids who cracked under the first interrogation. And that was a fatal blow to the entire operation. Now, police knew the truth. The organizers were Timothy and Neil. They weren't just kids with weed anymore. They were officially cartel suspects. By February 2014, the fairy tale was over. Timothy was the first to get caught. Cops found half a kilo of weed and some cash. Hardly a king of the highway, right? But the cuffs clicked, and the fairy tale turned into a felony case. A few days later, it was Neil's turn, and his bust was straight out of a movie. Kilos of drugs, guns, stacks of cash, even books about Mexican cartels. Yeah, he was literally studying El Chapo like a student in a crash course. If Timothy looked like a boy who got carried away, Neil looked like someone trying to speed run Drug Lord 101. But the real knockout punch was in their phones. Everything was there. Texts, sales logs, meetup schedules. They'd kept the entire network in their iPhones, almost like they'd gift wrapped it for the prosecutor. This wasn't an investigation. It was a present to the cops, with a bow on top. Once detectives opened the chats, the cartel collapsed in a single click. This didn't end like a legend. It ended like a high school project titled What I Did Last Summer. By April 2014, the trial began. No more smiles, no more varsity jackets. Now it was charges: possession, distribution, conspiracy, organization. It sounded like a script for a mafia series, except the actors were suburban prep school kids. The irony? Just a few years earlier, these guys were playing lacrosse. Now, they were playing with the law and losing. The judge set bail so high it made heads spin. $1 million for Timothy, $250,000 for Neil. The difference was a hint. Their roles in this play weren't equal. Haverford School pretended not to notice. For them, image was everything. Better to act like those two ex-students never existed than to stain the polished brochure cover. By fall, the sentences were handed down. Timothy pled guilty and got 23 months plus 5 years probation. Basically, he walked away almost untouched. Neil wasn't so lucky, he got the full hit, 15 years. One played cooperation and saved himself. The other played I'm the boss and lost everything. After prison, their paths split for good. Timothy tried to rebuild, studies, sports, helping others. He even founded rehab centers, almost like he wanted to reinvent himself as the anti-drug lord. Neil stayed locked up, his life frozen on pause. No more expansion, no more ambition, just a calendar with crossed off days. And that's the bottom line. They got everything suburban kids dream about: money, power, influence, and they lost it all in a flash. They had bright futures, but chose easy money and hard mistakes. In the end, one became a redemption story. The other became a cautionary tale. Together, they became a lesson. You can't win when you play mafia by high school rules. Instead of crowns and thrones, they got sentences and bars. And if once in the mirror they saw the kings of the highway, now the mirror shows only this: two guys who destroyed their own lives.